All right. Welcome to our attendees on Zoom today. We appreciate you joining us this afternoon or morning for those of you on the West Coast. You are joining our summit session entitled How to Put Your People First and Become the Best Place to Work. We'll be discussing practical ideas for ways to invest in people and culture. So we'll give folks a little bit more time to log in and settle in. While folks are logging in, let's go over some quick housekeeping items. So note that all of the summit recordings will be available on our Launchpad website within the next few days. Sessions are also available in the lobby right after the sessions end. We're also going to be emailing attendees links to the recordings. We definitely want to keep this conversational. We want to hear your input. So we would encourage our attendees to ask questions throughout the discussion using the Q&A feature. We will reserve some time at the end of the session to answer those questions. And then also, you can share your thoughts and connect with our team and other attendees on Twitter using the hashtag CTM Summit 21. We look forward to hearing from you. And then lastly, make sure you're registering for days 2 and 3 of the summit. So we're on day 1 right now. Tomorrow and Friday are days 2 and 3. When you register for and attend a session on day 3, you'll actually be entered to win a professional services package with CTM. So we've got some great things going on day 3. All right, well, welcome again. My name is Courtney. I am our strategic partnership manager here at CallTrackingMetrics. And I'll be moderating our session today entitled How to Put Your People First and Become the Best Place to Work. So we have 3 very talented guests with us today. I'd first like to welcome Shannon Duvall. Shannon is our HR director here at CallTrackingMetrics. Welcome, Shannon.
Thank you, Courtney.
And happy anniversary. Today is actually Shannon's 2-year anniversary at CallTrackingMetrics.
Goes by too fast.
Right? Means you're having a great time. We're also very excited to have our partners from Deepgram with us. So welcome Sam Zegas, Chief of Staff, and Tammy Pham, Head of Talent.
Hi, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Thank you. Deepgram is the leader in enterprise automatic speech recognition for call centers and software providers. They use machine learning to power speech recognition and natural language understanding. In his role, Sam actually focuses on strategy and operations, including people and culture. He also works very closely with Deepgram's linguistics team on developing new language models. Tammy is very involved in the strategic vision of recruiting people, operations, and culture for Deepgram. She has actually tripled their team in the past year. Exciting stuff. So thanks again for being here with us, Sam and Tammy.
My pleasure.
So all 3 of you have a focus on people, operations, and culture in your respective roles. And for our attendees today, we're actually here because our 2 companies have something really noteworthy in common. In 2021, both Deepgram and CallTrackingMetrics received the Inc. Best Workplaces Award. Inc.'s website states now that many companies operate remotely or in a hybrid environment, best workplaces really means having the best company culture. So congratulations to all of you on this award. It's been a tough couple of years for those in roles like Shannon, Sam, and Tammy. Let's take a quick look at some data here to get us started and provide some context. What we're seeing in their world is that it's taking a lot longer than usual to get hired. So it's taking HR a lot longer to fill roles. And then in terms of turnover, the 2021 Bureau of Labor Statistics report tells us that the overall turnover rate is 57.3%. That number will drop to 25% when considering only voluntary turnover, 29% when considering involuntary turnover, and just 3% looking at only high performers. So again, it's been a tough 2 years. So we're going to talk more about what these three have learned, where have they succeeded, what challenges they're preparing for in the years to come. So let's get started. We want to hear a little bit about the culture and values at Deepgram and CTM respectively. So I'll let our partners from Deepgram tell us a little bit more about your culture and values to get started.
Sure thing. And thanks again for having us. This is a great event you're putting on. So at Deepgram, when I think about culture, the first thing that comes to mind really is that culture is very difficult to define. It's a word that we use all the time, but what are we even really talking about? And to me, culture is about the norms of how we interact with each other more than anything else. With that definition, it's really something that we build collaboratively. It's difficult to define it top down. And so at its core, I think it's really a hiring strategy. It's about bringing people on who are going to contribute to a positive work environment and really share the values that the company is trying to promote. If I had to pick a list of things that are our cultural cornerstones at Deepgram, it's sort of 5 values. It's everyone should be themselves at work. We treat each other with kindness. We want to create an environment where people are always learning and are kept curious. We're oriented to the needs of the customer, and where we move fast with a startup mindset. It's critical for our success. And I think that we just try to be responsive to those needs over time. That's the core of our culture.
Thanks, Sam. And Shannon, can you tell us some more about the culture and values at CTM?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with Sam. It's very hard to put your finger on it, right? I think that the way that we define ourselves here is we're very purpose-driven. Employees love helping our customers. They love helping each other, so much so that we redefined our values and our mission this year based off of that. So our updated values that we actually just rolled out not too long ago, we are community-driven, we are customer-centric, we are champions of innovation, and we work with purpose. And so these are brand new, so we're still memorizing them, but they're definitely in line with where we've seen ourselves and how we've grown over the past 2 years.
That's great. And, Sam had mentioned that, culture is difficult to define. And I think basically what makes sense too is that you have to keep defining culture, right? Like you have to take a look at your values every year, 2 years, 3 years, and just really figure out if it makes sense for who you as a company, want to be. So tell us a little bit more about, what it means to invest in culture. Can you share some examples of how Deepgram does this?
Yeah, I'll start us off, and Tammy, if you have anything to add, would love to hear that too. For me, investing in culture is really about keeping a close read on the emotional needs of the team and making sure that we are doing things to meet those needs. Some things that are very consistent over time is that people want to be respected. They want recognition for hard work that they do. They want to enjoy the work that they do. They want agency in determining what they're going to be working on to a degree, and they want to develop as people. There are other needs that pop up over time, and we need to be responsive to those as well. But those are definitely 5 areas that I think we're constantly trying to engage with. So as the company grows and changes, sometimes we might be doing better at some of those areas and falling down in other areas. It's really important to do surveys so that we understand how people feel about each of those aspects of their work, and that we have systems in place so that when we identify a weakness in meeting some of those emotional needs, we can quickly come in and make an adjustment and make sure that we keep people happy there. I think that for us is really how we invest in culture.
It's interesting. I think a lot of businesses are always focusing on the needs of the customer, right? But it's so important to focus on the needs of your employees and everyone at the company. Shannon, can you share some examples of how CallTrackingMetrics invests in our culture?
Yeah, I think when I think of investing in culture, I really think of all the different components that work together to ensure that the company is supporting its mission and its values and its employees. And I think some companies think, oh, we'll just have a pizza party or a happy hour, but I think there's so much more to that, because those are the same companies that, they're paying their employees below market value, and maybe they're getting 1 week of vacation, right? It's not a well-rounded, thought out process. So when I think of investing in culture, I think of, what is our approach to setting employees up for happiness, like Sam was saying. So I think of it in terms of, are we offering the best benefits? Are we paying market value? Does our recruiting process lead the way? Does it make sure that we're hiring people that are aligned with our values? It's celebrating those employees' successes, not just from the top down, but from peers as well. And making sure that employees, as Sam said, are helping us to design things going forward. So it sounds like Deepgram uses employee surveys. We actually use a lot of employee committees. And so we'll create a communications committee, a feedback committee. We just created the culture committee, and we'll utilize different employees from across the board. Those teams are always a mix of different departments and different tenures, because it's really important to have a lot of different viewpoints. And we work together to hear how we're doing from employees and to implement those changes. So a little bit more face-to-face feedback than the surveys, but it sounds like very much aligned with what Deepgram's doing as well.
And I like that face-to-face approach. That sounds like it's probably pretty effective.
Yeah, and just to echo both of those, in actual practical ways, we have committees as well, but then we give folks the opportunity to create these affinity groups themselves. Like when Sam and I both started, we were sub 30 people, and I thought it was really important to educate folks about the Asian American Heritage Month, and I created the affinity group. So we meet monthly, we have lunch together, we talk about our history and background, and that's been great to help foster more affinity groups as we grow.
It's interesting to think about it, because we have, instead of Slack, we use the Flow doc. And while you'll have, it sounds like your group's very formal, we have these informal groups, like we have a pet flow and a movie flow and all these things that bring people together. And it's interesting how you'll have subcultures inside of your culture, and you just have to be supportive and aware of them and making sure that everyone has that opportunity. I think it's really neat when you think about all the different ways that people have found to connect without it being company led. I think that's also really important and tells a good story about our culture as well.
Yeah, we're all human, right? There's so many different ways that we can connect with one another outside of just what our job titles are, or the company that we work for, right? So you had all kind of talked a lot about hiring strategy. Sam, you had said, hiring strategy is really at the core of a culture, right? And Shannon, you talked about, how important it is to have a good strategy too, and starting right before they get their foot in the door and understanding who they are, and how they might fit and align with our culture. I had mentioned before that Tammy has helped to triple the Deepgram team. You guys have grown so significantly during the pandemic. How do you introduce new employees to culture when remote?
I think onboarding is key here, and I think we're all adjusting, especially during the pandemic, but making it very consistent, whether you are a hybrid employee, a remote employee, or an in-office employee. We found making videos is really great too, because it's very interactive, so that each person isn't, always saying the same. Sorry, we're not always having to facilitate one-on-ones, but then they get to review them in their own time, maybe play it multiple times, so they're not so nervous during these onboardings. We also try to get buddies too. We always try to onboard people together. It doesn't have to be on Mondays, which is a little bit different. It could be any day that we're able to do it. That's really critical. I think we provide different groups, like educating folks about all the different affinity groups and giving them the opportunity to join them has been really great. And then also the happy hours. We introduce happy hours, new hire happy hours every month, and they get to talk about, their families, the things that they enjoy doing outside of work, and we kind of connect through that. That's kind of been the starting point for us. And Sam could also elaborate. He's really heavily involved in the onboarding process.
Oh yeah, you covered it well, Tammy. I would just add that we do things that don't work sometimes. We tried Donut, for example, which is a tool that randomly connects people to chat with each other, and we found that people weren't really thrilled about using it, and we're not afraid to back off of an experiment. We like to be in experimentation mode and just see what is actually going to meet the need that people have at any given moment.
Right. I love the idea of a buddy system, and having someone as you come through the door who's who you can always kind of lean on, especially in a virtual environment. I think that's great. Big growth means big change, and I think a lot of people don't like change. CTM has grown a lot over the past couple of years too. Shannon, I'd love to hear from you as to how we keep our most tenured employees engaged.
So Lori and Todd, our founders, have created the 5-year club, and we have quite a handful of people that have been here 5+ years. Our longest tenure is only about 7.5 years, so we haven't been around that long with team members hired, but it's changed a lot in just that short period of time. And so meeting with them, Lori and Todd meet with them regularly to understand their feedback and their thoughts on the changes. And it's great because they keep us humbled, right? They remind us of our beginnings and where we came from. Change is inevitable. Things are going to change. Things have to change. But it's important to make sure that we're still aligning with that culture that started off, that made us so successful from the beginning, right? There was a secret sauce that worked, and we need to make sure that that's always mixed in a little bit, right? Maybe it's not 100% that anymore, but there is beauty to that because it worked, and it's what's kept our culture growing, and it's what's kept people here for so long. So meeting with them, understanding their viewpoint, reminding us of our roots, but also explaining to them, it gives an opportunity one-on-one to say, here's why we're changing, here's what's moving, because as the company's gotten bigger, those team members used to sit right next to Lori and Todd, and now they're on different floors, and now maybe they work different days in the office. So it also just reconnects and rebuilds those relationships and keeps them strong, which is also really important.
Yeah, and that goes hand in hand too with what Sam and Tammy were saying about keeping in mind employees' needs, and having that 5-year club in place really helps keep a focus on those employees that were here from the start, and continuing to make them feel special and engaged. With that, a big change was for a lot of companies was that we were remote, and then now we're moving to a hybrid work model. So love to hear about some of the challenges you guys are facing with the shift from remote to hybrid work, and what ideas might you have to improve these things.
Yeah, I can come in there. I think with hybrid, it's hard not having a good routine down, right? Productivity is up and it's down a lot of times because of context switching. So I think it's very important for us to have a even playing field for everybody. So having consistent culture throughout, being able to plan hybrid company events. So instead of just picking a time that may work for other folks, it might be super early or super late, we can plan smaller get-togethers across various teams. Again, like we said about investing in culture, celebrating those milestones is really important, making sure everybody has the necessary resources, whether it means their work from home setup, right? We offer a stipend for every new employee, but also in office, we want to make sure it's all pretty consistent.
Yeah, I would add to that. I'm so excited when I think about what the future of work is going to look like. And I have no assumptions that we're going to go back to the sort of the model of being in an office 5 days a week. And I think we're not alone in that. That's something a lot of people are thinking about. But of course, there are advantages to being physically together in an office. So what we're trying to do now is experiment with like non-traditional office spaces. We'll, for example, rent an Airbnb for 3 days, invite people to travel in, and they can stay there if they want, and people who are local can just drop in and work. It gives people a different format for doing some face-to-face work, but isn't quite the full investment in an office. In general, I think the theme that we're dealing with is that there's a rise in interest in flexibility. And that's something that we want to embrace. We want to give people the option to design an experience in the office or virtual that really it makes them feel engaged and productive. And that's an area of active experimentation for us right now. We don't have the answer yet, but I think the future is going to be very interesting to see where it heads.
Yeah, speaking of which, we're also working with like a virtual HQ, which is kind of nice, where we can have announcements and people can still, aside from the Slack, get to see all of the really cool anniversaries and getting to know one another. There's even some like mini games in there.
Oh, cool. So it sounds like it may be like a little social media hub for the company. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
When we're remote, there's obviously potential to become more siloed, only seeing people in your department. I know if you've multiple offices, maybe seeing people only in your offices or working with people only maybe in your time zone. How do you connect people across different departments, different offices, time zones? What does that look like?
Well, for us, there are a lot of things that we're experimenting with. Tammy talked earlier about the affinity groups where people can jump in. Sometimes it's a channel, sometimes it's a meeting that we have, and they can connect with other people who have those same interests. I think that has been helpful. We also have places for new joiners to get connected with one another. Surprisingly, though, the thing that I think people have been most excited about is that we did an internal hackathon, and that might be a little bit specific to our situation because we are a tech company and that wouldn't make sense in every context. But we basically gave people 3 days and said, hey, join a team of 5. It's going to be cross-functional. You probably have not worked closely with these other folks before, and build something cool with our product. And on Friday, you'll show it off. People had so much fun at that event. And I was getting feedback that they had learned so much, not only about other people at Deepgram, but also just about what's possible with the product that we provide. So I thought that was an interesting learning recently.
Absolutely. And just to chime in on that, I was actually a judge for the hackathon. So I got to see all of them. It was really, really cool. And we also got to see people, showcase some of their strengths and work on some of their weaknesses together. Some people are like, oh, I love to test out the actual like product. And so they were like solely the testers. And then some people were giving out feedback and some people were coders, but also watching others code. I thought it was really great. And there's been such positive feedback that we're probably going to try to do it at least once a quarter.
That's awesome. We're at actually a different point. So we just brought people back 3 days a week, and we're all aligned the same 3 days a week, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We're all remote Monday, Friday, except for our fully remote. We have a handful of fully remote employees. So we're coming back with a brand new emphasis on what it looks like in office. So we are getting ready to move into a brand new 26,000 square foot office where we'll actually all be on the same floor. Right now we're in a building where we're on 3 different floors. And so you can go weeks without seeing some of your coworkers that are 10 feet above your head, right? It's kind of crazy. So a new focus on having everyone on the same floor, having very open walkways, getting rid of offices, really eliminating the number of people in offices so everyone's out on the floor to create those natural conversations and collisions, and also a really strong focus on how do we engage those remote employees. So last week, our social club did a bingo and booze for Halloween, where our remote people got to come in through the Zoom. We had Zoom rooms set up and the people in the office all got to play bingo together. So really figuring out how do we pull them in fun ways, and how do we make the office the central and get rid of those silos, right? So we're a little bit, we've decided that's the direction we're going in, and we're a little bit further down the road, but we're excited to get into the new office and solidify that change. So I'm excited to see what it's going to be.
Yes, I mean we're always evolving. I think that's how you kind of have to keep things fun and exciting, right? Change can be scary, but change could also be very fun too. So let's talk about hiring, based on a set of shared values, right? While also encouraging diverse perspectives. How do you kind of strike a balance between hiring based on a set of shared values while also encouraging those diverse perspectives?
Yeah, so I think that this is a really important issue and no one does it right. So, our focus on experimenting is really key here. Tech always has a problem that it's not known for being inclusive and diverse, and there's really like no goal right? We're all just learning as we go. And so I think defining what our shared values are, which we've said above, and what we're looking for is really important to set the baseline, and making sure that we put the right interviewers, educating them across many different teams so that we can continually get feedback and challenge others. So I've seen a lot of great collaboration when I pull an interviewer from each team, whether it's sales and marketing to engineering to research, especially in these leadership roles, as a checks and balance kind of procedure. Meanwhile, we still encourage this diverse perspective by taking a close look at what our current team looks like and being very honest about what gaps we see. And then we also have like a Slack channel, a recruiting Slack channel that the entire company is a part of, where they could, suggest platforms, recruiting platforms, suggest other ways in which we can like interview folks, different types of interview plans. That's been really great. And I think in my role in particular, I think it's very important to be the advocate for candidates. So having many touch points, understanding what their motivations are, and then being able to challenge the hiring team whenever they come across some sort of bias or something that they're unsure of, making sure that those assumptions are not just assumptions. It's all very data-driven.
Mm-hmm. Sure. I think it's great that you include folks from different departments in that process, because obviously we all share the same values, but our jobs are so different. And so really understanding, how someone can fit into the company as being a community, maybe just not in their key role that they were hired for, is so important. Shannon, can you tell us more about how the recruiting process at CTM has changed in order to eliminate bias?
Yeah, so last year in August, we completely changed our entire recruiting process, and we put a big focus on hiring diversity. We had what I would say is not a great percentage of people that self-identified as minority, and we wanted to get that larger. It's important to have that diversity, to have the different perspectives. Everyone brings something different to the table. So what we did was we decided that it starts with HR, right? We're the front line, we're responsible for that. So when we interview candidates, what we do before we speak to any hiring manager about them is remove any identifying details from their resume. The school that they went to, their name, anything that could give any sort of hint or be assumed to be a hint about that person. And we assign them a letter, candidate A, candidate B, and we discuss that candidate. We don't use he or she or, it's they, it's them, and we just keep it very generic. We have the hiring managers choose based off of skill sets and answers. And then at that point, they're allowed to see the resume and move forward with the hiring process. It's been highly successful. 50% of our new hires since we've made the change have self-identified as a minority. So we're really pleased to see that we've been bringing on different perspectives and different viewpoints, and it's made our team great. It's been fantastic. So again, it's not perfect, as Tammy said. I'm sure there's more we can do. We can reach out, we can find new places to source from, where it's a crazy market right now, so we're all a little limited in how we're hiring. But I'm pleased with the improvement so far, knowing that there is more to do. But I think that that's a great way to be in just a year, right? I think that's a great improvement. So, but always welcome to new ideas.
Yeah, it's been really wonderful to watch CallTrackingMetrics go through those changes. The outcome has just been great. On the topic of bias, I'd love to hear from Sam and Tammy if there are other common practices or policies that companies should examine for possible bias.
Yeah, so I think, again, educating is really key here. We did host our first hiring manager boot camp, which we got all the hiring managers together, just giving them more information of what those biases could look like, right? Whether it's stereotyping or first impression, halo, there's just so many, and then how to mitigate that. So we built out these scorecards from 1 to 4, and we defined them. And then also we've implemented during these debriefs a quick thumbs up or thumbs down on a count of 3, which is really great. So no one's swayed by their feedback. And then we always go through negative feedback first, and then having the leaders go last always, so that, again, people can voice their opinions, and making sure that before we move to a decision, everyone's on board.
I would just add to this. A lot of the comments that have been made so far have been around really just the equity side of it. Are we including people, and are we building fairness into our process? That's absolutely critical. I just want to make it real from Deepgram's perspective on what the cost of this is if we don't do it right. We work in machine learning, and when we have a team that's too homogenous, we will inevitably have biases that are introduced into our product that are just a result of not having enough experiences and enough perspectives at the table. And one example of that goes far beyond Deepgram, it's something that's true of anyone in the speech processing space that we're in, is that most speech processing these days really focuses product development on essentially white dialects. And there are millions of people in the United States, tens of millions of people in the United States who don't speak in a sort of white newscaster English type way, and yet there aren't products that serve them. And if we don't address this issue through hiring and through very intentional decisions that we make about our team, then we won't have the perspectives and the resources in place to be able to tackle that kind of problem. So it's really important that we address it.
Yeah, that's such a great point, Sam. Thanks for sharing that with us. I think we all know that, having a diverse team helps, us to come to the best decisions for our companies, but in thinking about how it could have such a big impact on your product is such a different way of thinking about it, and so very important. So thank you again. Let's talk a little bit more about, 2022. It's right around the corner. In your opinions, what are HR professionals expecting to face in 2022?
A lot. I think that there is, there's a lot going on in the media around hiring and what are they calling it? The Great Resignation, right? So you're hearing these crazy numbers. You presented them at the beginning of the presentation, and expectations that people have, where they're coming from, whether they're valid. Sometimes we're battling very realistic expectations, and sometimes we're battling absolutely unrealistic expectations going through that hiring process. So I'm interested to see how that kind of shakes out, as well as, COVID's made people comfortable working remotely. Deepgram's talked about that's their new model, right? So balancing people's expectations with what we think is the right fit for our company and the right hybrid model for us. I think that those are both going to be two very big things that we continue to face in 2022.
Mm-hmm. And then something I also want to add is just that, we're recovering still in this pandemic. We're still in this pandemic. So, before as a recruiter, you might say, hey, what are these gaps in the resume? You now just have to ask these clarifying questions. You have to understand more about these candidates to understand, some of it's out of our control. Some of it, we just have to empathize a little bit and understand, and then get their motivations in order to make sure that we're making the best decision for ourselves as well as for these candidates.
Yeah. Some things that are on my mind. The big theme is that the future of work does not look like what we came from 2 or 3 years ago. Returning to the office is going to be about, balancing employee needs and desires with flexibility of work. If people are going to continue working remote, which they probably will at Deepgram, how do we work asynchronously? How do we build a strong employee experience and build community when people are not physically together? We have questions like, do we adjust compensation based on where people are regionally if we're all dispersed? And really, we need to increase our focus on wellness and mental health, just because it's been a long time that people have been working in this pandemic condition. I think the way that I approach these problems is almost to adopt kind of a product designer mentality. And the insight that I take from product design is to really collect continuous user feedback and to iterate and to say, this is not a thing that I'm going to design and implement and then wipe my brow and say, okay, I can walk away and not think about this for a little while, but rather like really being in conversation with people about how their needs are evolving and getting to a result that is also evolving along with them.
Thinking about what you said, Tammy, another thing that we've been seeing lately that's interesting is you talk about the break in employment. We're seeing a lot of people want to completely shift their career and say, they're applying for jobs where they don't necessarily have direct experience, but when you think about it, basic skill sets make them applicable for the job, but it's kind of getting over that, do we really need 5 years of experience? Can we be more flexible in what we have? And so it's been interesting seeing people that are just ready for a change, and they're putting themselves out there in ways that I haven't seen people do before. So it's been really interesting, and navigating those waters to determine what the right fit is for us and how flexible can we be. So yeah, taking the break made me think about that. We've seen some of that lately. I don't know if you guys have seen that, but we've definitely seen that.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I ask, typically you would ask, why did you leave that employer or what had happened there? It's more of like, what did you learn from it? Right? What have you been doing since then? It could be boot camps, it could be studying, it could just be spending time with family, right? Like understanding the importance of mental health and wellness and being, grateful for what you have today. I think it's super important. And it's definitely going to change the future of HR. It's going to change the future of culture in all companies going forward.
Great. Essentially, we should expect many more changes to come. Changes always on the horizon, changes in work environment, changes in the hiring process, changes in just an overall mindset as an employer, being that, we need to really focus on the employee, their needs, their mental health, their happiness, their work-life balance more than ever. I think that, COVID was so tough for everyone, but that's certainly one positive thing to come out of it, is that so many businesses are now putting that focus on people more than they may have ever, more than they may have never in the past. So it's been great. So this conversation, I think, was wonderful. Again, just highlighting the fact that culture is really focusing on your people, their needs, but always thinking about how you can be better and make things better for everyone, from your employees to your customers. Diversity is super important, right? It affects not just the culture, but your service, your software, your company. This has been really great. So if anyone has questions for our speakers today, please go ahead and throw them into the Q&A. I don't know that we've had any come through just yet. We've got 3 really great resources here for you guys to tap into if you have questions. If you don't think of any now while we're on the spot, you can go ahead and email them to our team, and we can, of course, follow up with you too. With that, I'm not seeing any questions come through. So just want to thank everyone again. Certainly send love to your HR managers. They are doing so much for us, behind the scenes. So just thank you again, Sam, Tammy, Shannon, for joining us today, for everything that you do for your people, your companies. It's great to have you all and just to chat with you today and hear about your takeaways. And for our attendees, thanks for joining us. Please, keep engaged. We'll see you hopefully later today, tomorrow, and Friday for the remainder of our sessions.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care, everyone.
Bye. Bye, guys.